Welcome to the OTA podcast, where we discuss everything performance training. I'm Coach Chris Barnard. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back to the OTA podcast. For today's pod, this is a common question that I get for coaches. As I said, if you guys have any questions, training-related questions, business-related questions as far as the coaching business, drop a comment down below and I'll go ahead and answer it for you guys. For today, we have one that says, I'm a college student, full-time / athlete, and want to be a gym owner. Any advice on starting? And the second one that goes hand in hand, it says, how do establish our first physical location? Savings ? Investors ? This is a common question I get. Let me first start off by saying is like everybody's different, right? It's context. But what I typically suggest and what I typically teach in our coaching program is a very specific way. The reason being is I always go by the saying is you never want to be gym rich and pocket broke. We don't get into this game to create a bunch of debt and just hope and pray. This isn't the field of dreams where we build it and they'll come, right? I'm a big fan of incrementally growing into a space and doing it through a lean startup, right? So what I typically suggest, and it's very similar to the path that I took, is if you're starting off, you don't have a business, right? So you don't want to go into this. If you are a trust fund baby and you got all kinds of money, fine. If you want to spend your money, great. If money is an option, right? But if you're like me, where money is very, you got to create business to be able to then create your space, there's a certain path that I think you should take. So number one, when you're starting off in your coaching business, and you might not like this, you have to start establishing some revenue right off bat. And you could do that by starting in a park, which I did, or you could do that by renting out of another gym location. This is going to minimize risk and it's not going to be a huge overhead. One of the biggest mistakes that I see guys make is they open up a facility, they go into all this debt, they don't recognize all the numbers. They don't have their numbers intact of what it actually costs. There's a lot of different hidden fees or things you might not be thinking of, because when it comes to business or when it comes to opening your gym, there's two sets of expenses we want to look at. Number one is going to be your opening expenses. And that's going to be everything associated with like your equipment, all the things that you got to buy new, your back end, your tables, your bathroom stuff, everything that's all leading up to you opening your doors, right? Your mats, your turf, your office, your desks, all those different things. The other side of that is going to be your operating expenses. Think of these as your monthly recurring expenses, your rent, your utilities, your software, ongoing expenses month over month that you have to continue to pay for. So what I see guys do is they pull out either loans or they go into debt and they sink themselves down, right? And they're get so wrapped up in having to deal with trying to climb out of that hole that they don't allow themselves the energy to give a quality service or product, which is your coaching. And so I see so many guys get burnt out, run down because they just buried themselves in so much debt and they're scratching, clawing. They usually, what they do is they take on a lot of one-on-ones or they start getting wacky. They got to start doing different things to be able to come up with that revenue to pay those bills every single month. Because on top of your operating expenses, you now have all that debt that you accumulated. So going back to it, what I like to see is I try to get people to stimulate and start their coaching business. Don't say you have a coaching business until you have somebody paying you money for your services. Start in a park, rent a gym, minimize the risk, very low overhead to do that. We've worked with coaches that have made $30,000 in a park. We've talked them out of getting a facility and they are just consistently being able to rake it in month over month with zero overhead. So you want to start that business. You want to get it up to a certain rate. Now, depending on where you live and depending on the first location that you want, you should be able to go on something like LoopNet or any of these websites that you can research on Google to see what warehouse space in your general area looks like. Now, depending on your budget, you're probably going to look for something between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet to start off. I started off in 800, went to 1,200, and now we're in 8,000, okay? You're going to want to start in that 2,000 to 4,000 square foot range, and you're going to want to kind of see based on those numbers, basically you can start to put together a little bit of a budget. You're going to want to find out what those operating expenses are, and then what that would be built out to as far as your opening expenses. So put together your equipment list on a minimal level, see what it takes to just basically open your gym up. In the beginning, your opening expenses are going to be your racks, your barbells, your benches, your mats, and then if there's a side of turf, maybe some dumbbells, very bare bones, keep it the basics. You don't need to add a bunch of machines, a bunch of rowers, stuff like that. Once you have those numbers, which is your opening expenses, very loosely, and then your operating expenses based off the average of warehouse gym that you're looking for, or other if you want. I believe in going the warehouse side of things, or flex. What's up, coaches? Real quickly, let me go ahead and introduce you to Performance Coach U certification. Now, this is the certification / course that I put together for coaches who want to train athletes and not only get results, but also maximize profits in the private sector. The problem that I saw with a lot of these courses and certifications out there for coaches was that they provided a lot of information and not a lot of application. So I wanted to pull back the covers over 10+ years of experience and show you the ins and outs of actually being in the trenches so that you get maximum results while also scaling your business. So if you're interested in this, go ahead and check out the link down below and you can get more information. Then you're gonna have that number of operating expenses. You're gonna say, okay, 3,000 square foot facility, it's gonna cost me, $4,000 per month. Average utility is probably gonna be about $500 a month. You're gonna wanna see if they have triple net, all that stuff. You could do that basic research. But here's the deal. Here's where that's important to know. Because now that you know those numbers, what you're going to want to do is once you've started this coaching business over here, working in parks or in other gyms, you're going to put 20% aside minimum. You could get more aggressive depending on how quickly you want to jump into your first location. And then you're going to save that 20% up, right? The rest is going to be your living expenses, stuff like that, whatever you need to do. But that 20%, you should be able to first be able to cover your opening expenses. Once you get to that, let's say it's like 20,000, whatever, 25,000. Then your next component is, now that I have this reserve, which is my opening, I'm going to build my coaching business up to be able to cover my operating expenses, my average operating expenses of the locations I'm looking at. So let's say it's 4,500, $5,000. This coaching business that I'm doing in the park or renting out of a gym, I want my client base on a monthly recurring revenue to meet what the operating expenses are. Okay, so let's say that it's $5,000 over here, operating expenses. You're going to want to get your coaching business up to $5,000. And so what you do is once you have that and you have enough cash reserve for your opening expenses, then you could go ahead and basically hop into your first location. I'm a big fan of keeping that now that you're in your first location and you've gotten things up to it and you're in the green and you're paying yourself, you've scaled that up, you've got some customers. Then what you want to do is you want to continue to keep that 20% reserve. Now in the beginning, if you like your location, it might just be a matter of taking that 20% and consistently investing it back into the gym. Get a new piece of equipment, get new things, have your eye on different, you might have a kettlebell set, you might have new dumbbell racks, you might have new sleds, whatever it is, you keep putting that 20% back into it month over month. Sometimes you might need to save up for a particular thing, but you just don't want to kill your cash reserves or go in debt again. And then once you've the only time that you would essentially move to a new location is essentially that you've outgrown yours. And the way that you outgrow yours is you reach a certain capacity. The amount of people that you could run in group per hour has exceeded the limits. Once you reach that, what I typically teach is you then incrementally raise your prices slightly to where you could get a little bit more aggressive. And once you've reached that, you're completely at capacity. And by then you have enough money coming in month over month where you could start looking for your next bigger location. So it's a very incremental process. I know it's a little bit more advanced. This is something that we absolutely teach within our coaching program. We've helped support, A lot of different coaches open up their own facility, and that method alone of going along and being able to do it incrementally, staying patient, paying your dues, and working the grind, to me, is what sets you up. The guys who I see, I have a dream, I know I can make it work. You revisit them 2 years down the road and they're just buried in that debt. And more times than not, they're just burnt out from the grind. They're still in that rat race. So make sure you do it right. Make sure you stay patient and make sure that you minimize risk and you allow that cash flow from your coaching business to continue to reinvest into your actual brick and mortar location, and you'll set yourself up for success down the road. I hope that helps. If you're a coach and this is something that interests you and I can support you, go ahead and check out the links down below. I have some links there for you that can support you in opening up your own gym location. Talk to you guys next time.